del Auditorium. For those joining us online, we are pleased to have you with us in the YouTube video stream. So today, the aim of this conference is threefold. A, we want to present the significant deliverables in the area of internal security which were achieved during the current Commission mandate. Secondly, we also want to reflect on the future challenges that lie ahead in the area of internal security. And thirdly, we mark the beginning of the 25th anniversary of Europol, and this is the start of celebrations. Throughout the event today, we have planned 3 multidisciplinary panels, each moderated by Jennifer Baker. These panels will include some of you who are now sitting in the audience, very high-level experts, practitioners, and representatives from academia and civil society. We're eager to engage in critical discussions and also explore strategies and solutions that will further enhance our internal security. So we go from the serious and organized crime, disrupting global criminal networks, to the shaping the future, counteracting terrorism and radicalization in digital age, to data at crossroads, Europol as a hub against crime. But before we go to the panels, let me introduce, and it's a big pleasure to introduce you, our esteemed Commissioner, Ylva Johansson, followed by Executive Director of Europol, Catherine de Bolle, who will deliver the opening interventions of today's conference. I think Commissioner Johansson doesn't really need introduction in this community. She's been in charge of the Home Affairs portfolio since 2019. She's been champion EU security policy since the beginning of her mandate in a rapidly changing security context. I know that she's most often associated with migration, but actually has been done a lot of work in internal security. She went beyond her mission letter that she got from the President in the beginning for security, fostering major police cooperation code, boosting law enforcement exchange of information, proposing some of the strongest rule in the world together to go after criminal money, tackling terrorist content online, upgrading the Europol regulation, revamping regulation on firearms, or as yesterday went into force actually the directive on combating human trafficking, and also elevating a huge exchange of international partners, particularly Latin America. Also, Catherine de Bolle needs little introduction. At the head of Europol since 2018, she's been the first woman to hold this position. At the helm of the agency, she managed to grow the agency with steady hand, strengthening its reputation as a key player and law enforcement service provider in Europe, taking up new tasks seamlessly and with added value. A common element that brings you two together is the fact that you're both women exercising leadership functions in a traditionally very male-dominated environment. And I think today, again, 20% in the law enforcement area are women, and the room is, I think, very much representative of that. So the ambition to encourage gender mainstreaming in law enforcement is also something that needs to be recognized as a legacy of the work of the two of you. Because, as Commissioner, you normally say, if you ignore half the world, it's looking at the world with one eye shut. Or, put it differently, if you ignore half of the population, you only get the job half done. So we will welcome you for your introductory words, but first we're going to have a little surprise video. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very good conference.
Last week, Polish Prime Minister Tusk announced arrests for beatings, arson and suspected arson linked to Russia. In April, the German federal prosecutor reported arrests of members of a pro-Russian terrorist group planning arson and explosive attacks. The Czech Foreign Ministry reported cyber attacks by a Russian state-controlled actor. And Dutch intelligence warns of suspicious mapping of North Sea wind turbines and preparations for sabotage. It's good news that the Member States and the Commission last year stress-tested the resilience of the energy sector against attacks. But as the war against Ukraine continues, countering sabotage should be high on our agenda and the agenda of the next Commission. Counter-espionage is the responsibility of Member States' intelligence services, but countering sabotage is also police business. Police are the first on the scene. When there is a fire, when there is vandalism, when there is violence, Russia uses proxies to carry out missions, extremist groups, criminals. As Commissioner, I have from day one built ties with the intelligence community. And today, I must say, we have a very strong cooperation, even though intelligence is formally a national competence. We understand each other's needs better and how to help each other better. The next Commission must continue to foster this cooperation between law enforcement and intelligence. Hostile state actors are not the only ones to threaten our society. Far-right violent extremists, often inspired by Russia, directly challenge democracy. Last week, the court case started against the alleged plotters of a far-right coup in Germany. Terror suspects are getting younger and younger, going down internet rabbit holes, making up a do-it-yourself ideology. And after the 7th October attacks and the war in Gaza, we've seen a teacher killed in France, 2 Swedish football fans killed here in Brussels, reports of Hamas plotting attacks in Europe. Jihadist terrorism is still the biggest threat, with no sign of decreasing. I'm especially concerned about the ISKP, a regional branch of Islamic State capable of carrying out big attacks abroad. We have done a lot to prepare ourselves against the terrorist threat. I put forward the first EU counter-terrorism agenda in 15 years. Member States are increasingly using the terrorist content online regulation to take down terrorist propaganda, issuing so far more than 550 removal orders to take down terrorist content within the hour. We need to counter terrorism with the strong arm of the law and the open arms of prevention. That's why we are continuing our important work against radicalization. Next month, we are setting up the EU Knowledge Hub to prevent radicalization. And thanks to this preventive work, attacks are not made, lives are not lost, and victims are supported and remembered. Organized crime is as big a threat as terrorism, and we must fight it with the same dedication. Organized crime is not only a threat to life and security, but also to democracy and society. Europol's recent mapping of 821 most threatening criminal networks shows they are very resilient. 1/3 of the criminal networks have been there for more than 10 years. Nearly 90% of them have infiltrated the legal economy, running businesses, investing in real estate. 70% of these most threatening criminal networks use corruption. But it's not corruption or violence, because 70% also use severe violence. Their brutality only matches their impunity. like the criminals who killed 2 prison guards during an escape in France 2 weeks ago. Organized criminals in Ecuador directly attack democratic institutions with violence and murder, and we follow that and we are afraid. But this is happening here too. Journalists, lawyers, politicians threatened or murdered by criminals in the European Union. I made it my mission to put the fight against organized crime on the top of the European agenda. And as part of my strategy against organized crime, I put in place a new EU law on asset recovery to take away the fast cars, big houses and piles of cash from the criminals. I proposed a new anti-corruption rules to criminalize all forms of corruption in all member states. And I call on member states to support strict anti-corruption rules. To fight organized crime, we need to work much more closely together in the European Union and beyond. We need closer cooperation also with partner countries globally, because it takes a network to fight a network. I was the first ever EU Commissioner for Home Affairs to travel to Latin America. I did that last year to Ecuador and Colombia. One concrete result of this trip was a security assessment that we are now carrying out in the port of Guayaquil, or the ports of Guayaquil, because there are several. We are working on agreements with 5 Latin American countries so Europol in the future can exchange the personal data needed to fight crime and have common investigations. We already have this in place with Colombia, but that's the only Latin American country so far with this status agreement that allows the good cooperation. Last October, I presented a roadmap against drug trafficking and organized crime. And in January, we launched the European Ports Alliance to keep criminals and drugs out of our harbors. We are closing the net. I'm proud to tell you today that from 14 ports at the launch in January, we are now 31 ports as members of the alliance. And the alliance is becoming operational. Customs officials visiting each other's ports, sharing best practices. And soon we will discuss an operational measures against criminal infiltrations in the ports. And to counter the persistent threat of drugs trafficking, I can announce today I will establish a European Commission coordinator for the fight against drug trafficking to help effectively implement our policies. And also a word on a crime that threatens the most vulnerable in society, child sexual abuse. Another crime that spans continents, with perpetrators in Europe paying to watch rapes of children on the other side of the world, and is spiraling out of control. In 2009, 750,000 predators were online at any given moment. Today, it's 2.5 million predators online at any given moment. And we leave our children alone out there. Every 2 seconds, a video or picture of a raped child is uploaded to the internet, often of rapes of very young children, severe sexual violence towards babies and toddlers. I should say that we are failing our children today. This crime is a question for us, it questions us as a society. What kind of society are we if we allow this to happen and to get worse? It's time for the internet companies to take responsibility. That's why it's essential to put in place permanent, comprehensive legislation to prevent the EU from becoming a safe haven for perpetrators. Organized crime, terrorism, child sexual abuse. These threats undermine the fabric of society and they are global. I just discussed the specific measures I put forward to deal with these specific threats. But the bedrock of our security in Europe is police cooperation and information exchange, key to address all these threats. And Europol is at the heart of European police cooperation. Just a few recent examples reported this month. Europol supported Italian and Turkish police to dismantle a criminal organization involved in murders across Europe. Supported Spain and the Guardia Civil to dismantle a cocaine laboratory and made 20 arrests. Supported police to rescue 4 children from abuse. I made sure Europol can do an even better job with a new mandate, with more resources, more staff, more powers to fight crime, balanced by a democratic oversight. And we've improved police cooperation. For example, by modernizing automated data exchange, the PRIM network made it faster and better. And all of these threats I discussed today are not only global, but they are digital. Some are specific digital threats like disinformation and cyber attacks, but all crimes are nowadays in some way digital. Criminals and terrorists use the internet to commit their crimes. They leave traces in the digital world. This makes access to data and data exchange essential for police work. E-evidence rules is now in place for quick access to cross-border evidence. But a big part of the digital world have become, in practice, a no-go area for police, unable to access even with lawful warrant, because evidence disappears so quickly. Data is not stored or is not accessible. In the next mandate, it's necessary to find solutions for lawful access to data. And generative AI is also going to be such a challenge. The potential for crime is enormous. We had a recent case in Hong Kong where criminals scammed a financial worker into paying $25 million. He took part in a video conference, and all the other participants were deep fakes, including his colleagues and the chief financial officer. Deep fakes can make the flood of disinformation much, much worse. And AI is already being used to make child sexual abuse material by training the AI on pictures and videos of real rapes of real children. While technology is running, we are walking. As lawmakers and law enforcers, we are already falling behind. We need to catch up. We need to start running. But still I can say that I am proud, even if the world has become a much more dangerous place. I think I can say that we made Europe a little bit safer. For the future, it will be your job, all of you here today, to keep Europe safe in this dangerous world. I am proud of what we have achieved, and I'm proud of Europol, of what you have achieved. Well respected, well trusted, and this is well deserved. And I'm very proud of you, Catherine de Bolle, my executive director. We've gone through a lot together, you and I, Catherine. You have made Europol what it is today. And I could not have achieved what I have done as Commissioner in security during this mandate without your dedicated work and your leadership. All of you should be proud. I want to end, as I started, by saying happy birthday, Europol, 25 years old. It's an important age if you're a person. You're all grown up, but you have still the whole life ahead of you. And so it is with Europol. In 25 years, Europol has become the foundation of the EU police cooperation. But you still have a great future ahead of you. Thank you.
Dear Commissioner, dear Chiefs of Police, Deputy Chiefs, dear colleagues and dear friends, thank you very much for joining us today as we commemorate the 25th anniversary of Europol. Europol is at the very heart of the European internal security architecture. And today we are also looking back at our common achievements in the field of internal security. I must say that the last 5 years have been very intense and fruitful. And I would like to congratulate and thank you, Commissioner Johansson, your team, and the Directorate General for Migration and Home Affairs for the important accomplishments in this area. As Executive Director of Europol, it is a pleasure to address you today and to reflect on the journey of an organization that has played a pivotal role in maintaining safety and security across Europe. Over the past 25 years, Europol has evolved remarkably. Our history is one of constant adaptation and transformation. Adapting to the changing landscape of organized crime and terrorism, to the evolving needs operationally and the requirements of Member States' law enforcement agencies, to the development of the security union, and in general to the evolution of the EU as an internal security actor. And finally, by adapting to ambiguous and uncertain geopolitical trends that impact the operational context and policing. The war in Ukraine and in the Middle East, instability, climate change, pandemics, or natural disasters. In this complex environment, Europol has become a cornerstone of European security and European cooperation. The very idea of Europol, as formulated by the late German Chancellor Helmut Kohl in 1991, has always been closely associated with European integration. In particular, with the notion that the free movement of persons had to be accompanied by enhanced security for our citizens and a reinforcement of the EU internal security as a whole. Establishing a European criminal intelligence agency was the logical consequence of the informal police cooperation that was taking place at the European community level since the 70s. Therefore, the Maastricht Treaty of 1992 established that police cooperation was a matter of common interest and made an explicit reference to a European police office. It was very much sanctioning a specific set of circumstances existing at that time. In fact, Europol is not a top-down political and institutional construction. It is the practical manifestation of a pre-existing operational practice developed over the years by the Member States' law enforcement agencies. It is very much a grassroots development, responding to the specific requirements of European police cooperation, the need to meet in an environment of trust, to sit around a common table in order to have a multiplying effect on the fight against organized crime and terrorism. As we look back on Europol's evolution, I would like to briefly reflect on what has changed and what has remained. Serious and organized crime is both a structural and a fluctuating phenomenon. And over the last 25 years, it has undergone significant transformations, adapting to technological advancements, globalization, and shifting socio-political landscapes. These changes have made combating serious and organized crime increasingly complex and increasingly demanding, requiring a constant evolution in law enforcement strategies and international police cooperation. There are two fundamental trends which have had a transformational impact on the criminal landscape. First is the digital revolution, which has not only transformed legitimate business practices, but also provided criminals with new avenues for illicit activities. Back in 1999, when Europol started operating in The Hague, only about 4% of the world population could access the internet, compared to 70% nowadays. Today, cybercriminals exploit the internet to commit the entire spectrum of offences, including new ones like hacking, digital identity theft, online fraud and ransomware attacks. The dark web has become a hub for illegal trade, offering anonymity and a global marketplace for drugs, weapons, counterfeit goods or human trafficking. In response, Europol developed cutting-edge cybercrime units, employing employees and specialists who work tirelessly to stay ahead of these ever-evolving threats. The European Cybercrime Centre, established 11 years ago, has become a beacon of excellence in combating digital crime, fostering collaboration across borders and sectors and of expertise. And the second key transformational trend for organized crime has been globalization. The increased movement of people, of goods, of capital across border has facilitated the expansion of criminal networks. We have seen how, in the midst of a recent global multi-crisis, serious and organized crime systematically reinvents itself. Organized crime groups have become more sophisticated, more complex and more transnational, exploiting differences in legal system, in enforcement capabilities among countries. Recently, I spoke about a kind of global crime warming. To address this global challenge, Europol quickly expanded its capabilities, fostering collaboration with third countries in Europe and beyond. 24 years ago, Europol signed its first cooperation agreements with Iceland, Norway, and the United States. But today, Europol is at the center of an extensive network of liaison officers from over 50 countries and organizations, all based in the headquarters in The Hague. When Europol was established in 1999, the world was a very different place. As we look back, it is clear that our mission has expanded considerably. Today, we confront a wide array of complex and interlinked crime activities, reflecting the evolving nature of crime in the 21st century. Despite these challenges, several core principles have remained steadfast, guiding Europol's mission and ensuring our effectiveness. I would like to highlight a number of key features that, in my view, constitute Europol's 7 pillars. The first one is our commitment to collaboration. Europol was founded on the principle of cooperation, recognizing that crime and terrorism has no border and that a united approach is essential. The spirit of collaboration is probably best exemplified with the establishment in 2015 of the Task Force Fraternité after the terrorist attacks in Paris and later in Brussels. Second is our pledge to operational support. Europol is a service-oriented organization. In an increasingly complex environment, our purpose has always been to develop Europol further as a strong, operationally focused organization with the aim of delivering the services most important to the law enforcement agencies in the member states of the European Union. We have been doing so by developing operational centres of specialised expertise, responding to member state security needs and expectations. I already mentioned the Cybercrime Centre in 2013, the Internet Referral Unit in 2015, the European Counter-Terrorism Centre in 2016, as the result of the terrorist attacks, the Migrant Smuggling Centre in the context of the migrant crisis in 2015, the European Serious and Organised Crime Centre to enhance our capabilities against increasingly violent networks, and the European Financial and Economic Crime Centre to address the penetration of organised crime in our economies and into the social fabric. We aim to deliver real operational added value. We have prioritised investigations against high-value targets in the framework of operational task forces, and these task forces have proven to be an invaluable tool in the fight against serious and organised crime, with the most ambitious investigations ever undertaken at European level. Our third pillar, it's intelligence sharing. Europol's vision is to ensure an effective response to the threats of organised crime and terrorism by acting as the criminal information hub in the European Union. The analysis of information is the DNA of Europol, as we often say. The processing of large and complex data sets is necessary for police work in today's digital world. And we can do this now, thanks to the recast, our mandate. The large and complex data sets are lawfully collected by member states and by operational partners and submitted to Europol for operational analysis and forensic support. This happens under judicial oversight. For example, when Europol is involved in a joint investigation team or where an operational task force is established. Our aim is to ensure a continued, lawful access to criminally relevant information from inside the EU and from outside the EU. Another enduring pillar of Europol is our dedication to innovation. As criminal tactics evolved, so must our methods. We have consistently invested in staying at the forefront of technological advancements to enhance our investigative capabilities, whether through our state-of-the-art forensic laboratories or our pioneering use of data analytics. Europol continues to leverage innovation to outspace criminals and terrorists. Our fifth pillar is accountability. We are determined to make Europe a safer place by contributing to an area of freedom, security and justice. Europol places the individual at the heart of its activities. Our role is to protect citizens against organised crime and terrorism. And compliance with fundamental rights, including data protection, has represented a founding pillar of Europol right from the start, 25 years ago. Europol has built one of the most solid and transparent data protection ecosystem across the law enforcement community. Over time, we have strengthened our data protection regime through scrutiny from the Parliament, enhanced data protection supervision with a new role for the data protection supervisor and a new internal position like the Fundamental Rights Officer. Partnerships constitute our sixth pillar. We have strengthened the engagement with law enforcement agencies across different disciplines like financial investigation units, customs services, or with other actors like the intelligence community. We also have developed alliances with the private sector, an aspect reinforced in the recent amended regulation of Europol. Since its establishment, Europol has developed into a strong enabler that brings relevant third countries and organizations together to maximize the operational results. We are committed to continue this engagement, in particular with the Schengen-associated countries, Interpol, and the Justice and Home Affairs agencies. And these alliances are instrumental to our success, enabling to us to pool resources, share intelligence, and mount coordinated responses. And finally, our seventh pillar, and for me one of the most important ones, is trust. Trust is the most precious commodity in the world of police cooperation. Sharing and exchanging criminal and terrorist information between countries and with relevant agencies is best achieved through building trust rather than creating obligations. Retaining the public's trust is also fundamental for any future policing, be it national, be it international, be it online, be it offline. As we will hold European elections in a few weeks, it is crucial that we continue to build trust and avoid social polarization, because that is the foundation of effective law enforcement cooperation. In the face of these complex challenges, there are always risks of disengagement or retrenchment from existing cooperation mechanisms. At Europol, we are actually conscious that the trust we have been building up over the last 25 years needs to be preserved. We will do so together with our stakeholders in the management board and with the support of our legislators. Dear colleagues and friends, the social and economic costs of organized crime and terrorism are so high, they are so politically, economically, and socially damaging that no single organization or country, however powerful, can address them alone. This is why we need to continue to build on our long-standing efforts and progress in international police cooperation to further modernize and to strengthen our tools. Europol's unwavering focus on protecting European citizens has always been our driving force. Everything we do is aimed at ensuring the safety and the security of the communities we serve. This mission remains as vital today as it was already 25 years ago. As we celebrate this milestone, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to all those who have contributed to Europol's success, to my predecessors, to the dedicated staff, in the past and present. Their expertise, passion, resilience have been the foundation of our achievements. To our partners and stakeholders, your collaboration and support have been invaluable. And to you, Commissioner Johansson, the last 5 years for Europol, you made the difference. Thank you.
Good morning. You can hear me. Wonderful. No more technical hitches. As the Director General announced at the beginning, my name is Jennifer Baker. I'm a journalist and presenter based here in Brussels, and I'll be moderating the 3 panels this morning. But first, it's not a surprise anymore. We are going to watch the video delayed, presumably because the European Commission's firewall is working too robustly. But I am assured we can have a look now.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather here to celebrate a special milestone, the 25th anniversary of Europol. It's a momentous occasion that deserves our recognition and applause. For a quarter of a century, Europol has been at the forefront of combating organized crime, terrorism, and other serious forms of criminal activity across Europe. Through its collaborative efforts, intelligence sharing, and advanced technology, Europol has played a crucial role in maintaining the safety and security of our communities. Its dedication and commitment to justice have made a significant impact on countless lives. Happy 25th anniversary, Europol. But this is not really me. I am not Ylva Johansson. I am an avatar generated by AI, made by AI quickly and cheaply. In the wrong hands, in criminal hands, this tech can really spoil the party.
That, of course, is spookily convincing indeed, and all the more so as we have the Commissioner sitting here and just saw her. To those joining us online, a very warm welcome. You didn't just see the Commissioner speaking on our panel here today. That was a deep fake, but do share your thoughts using the hashtag #SecurityEU. If you are going to share it, please make sure to indicate that that was the case. Our 3 panels this morning, we're going to look at, firstly, organised crime and dismantling organised crime networks. Then we're going to move on to the question of terrorism in the digital age and the particular impact that online digitalisation is having in terms of radicalisation. And finally, our last panel this morning will look at access to data for disrupting those terrorist and criminal networks and how we can do that in a way that is aligned with our European values while still putting the emphasis on fighting crime. Our first panel is Serious and Organised Crime, Disrupting Global Criminal Networks. We're going to look back on the last 25 years of Europol, of course. That will be a thread through all 3 panels. But specifically, we're going to look at, on this panel, apprehending high-value targets, cross-cutting global response against this threat, including the systemic sharing of information with member states and trusted third countries, evolving the use of the Schengen Information System, and also Europol's mandate in tackling criminal networks and all these challenges looking to the future. So I'm pleased to have joining me for this panel, please do come and join me on stage, Johan Olsson, head of the Swedish Police National Operations Department. Mr. Olsson has a long experience within the Swedish Police Authority, as he was also acting National Police Commissioner. Lorenzo Brucosi is General Security and IT Security Expert based in the US, previously head of the Regional Criminal Department in Milan and Florence, and has 20 years of experience in cross-border investigations and cooperation, particularly with EU agencies. And finally, Laura Stefan is Executive Director and Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Coordinator at Expert Forum, which is an independent Romanian think tank focused on anti-corruption. And she's also a former director in the Romanian Ministry of Justice and also previously worked with EU-level European Commission and the Council of Europe. Thank you all very much. To start, I'm going to ask the same question and get a sense from each of you on how the organised crime landscape has evolved over the last 20 years, the last quarter of a century, and how the EU response has evolved in parallel. Maybe give me, 1 or 2 key milestones that you think stand out. We're going to have to share microphones, so I think, let me start, Johan, with you.
Is it working? Yes, fine. Excellent. Now, from a Swedish perspective, I would say that the big change in terms of crime has been that organized crime has been moved from a quite minor area to the absolutely biggest challenge we have. organized crime is evolving very quickly, but also in different ways. And I would say from a Swedish perspective, the ability, first the frustration, and then the ability to get hold of the information in the encrypted chats been one of those pillars, absolutely key moments for us.
Lorenzo, your thoughts and any
Thanks.
big milestones that stand out?
I have a different, another point of view, another angle. I mean, I know that organized crime really evolved in the last 25 years, but really what is amazing is that society evolved in the last 25 years. And I think that crime and organized crime are usually just an expression of the society. If I'm not wrong, the first cell phone with an integrated camera has been launched on the market in the year 2000. So basically, when Europol started these activities, we didn't have any idea what a smartphone was, moreover, what a smartphone would have been. Then we realized that organized crime was exploiting technology, and we enhanced our technical investigation. We realized that they were exploiting legal business structures, and we enhanced our financial investigation. My concern is that while we are doing this, enhancing our technical financial investigation, we risk to forget what I call the military side of the organized group. I mean, take a look to what it's happening in the Netherlands with the Mokro Mafia. Take a look to what happened a couple of weeks ago in France, I mean, May 14, if I'm not wrong, when a transport of the French penitentiary police has been attacked by a commando, killing officer, to let an inmate escape. I don't think that we can afford to let the violence spread in our streets. And this is why I say that, okay, let's take care of our technical investigation, take care of our financial investigation, but don't forget the military side of the organized crime. Thank you.
Laura, bring your expertise to bear on where we've come from in the last 25 years and what we are confronted with.
It would be unsurprising for me to say that I see more and more connection between organized crime groups and high-level corruption, how they're taking advantage of loopholes that exist in our institutions and in the top political class, I must say. Of course, this is a huge benefit when a country faces high-level corruption, structural corruption. Organized crime groups take advantage of that. It's no secret. Then we see a movement, a serious movement into financial crime and into the area of white-collar crime coming from organized crime groups. And I think some of the most efficient developments that we saw at EU level and therefore also at national level were in the area of asset recovery, reinforcing anti-money laundering rules, reinforcing confiscation rules. Unfortunately, what is still missing is a real implementation of these instruments, right? I mean, how many countries do really treat money laundering as a standalone crime in their jurisdictions? How many countries really understand the value added of extended confiscation in addition to anti-money laundering as a standalone crime? So I think the challenge is to implement these rules. And also, I think what is very telling in terms of real political will is to see how much resources are being put into systems that should fight crime, right? Financial investigation, police forces, prosecution units that should deal with this type of crime. How much resources, how much money do they get? How many specialists do they get? How many people do they get? And if there are 2 per country, then I think we have the answer.
Well, I mean, of course, a lot of that is national competency, and at EU level, the legislation can and indeed has been put in place, but as you say, it's a matter of implementation. So, Johan, I'm interested to know which sort of initiatives or strategies you find to be most effective in fighting organised crime, and whether there's any template for those initiatives that could be shared widely across different countries within the framework that's been put there by the EU. What works? What strategies don't work?
I mean, from our experiences, information sharing is key because we could use that to attack all kinds of different. The violence is very important, the criminal profits, but to getting the information, sharing it, and exploiting it is really the key. So information is at the heart of our strategy and the European strategy. I think that is right. But I think we also need to talk a little bit more about preventing crime. This information also gives us a good insight into the structures and the modus operandi. We need to use that more to crime-proof different policies. For example, we have a huge problem with fraud in Sweden, especially hitting vulnerable people as an effect of digitalization from the banks. That can be avoided quite easily by just thinking through, if we have these criminal networks, what can they do? There will be EU legislation in terms of payment requirements. We need to think about different things that the powerful criminal networks will exploit. So crime proofing as well in terms of policy and information.
Lorenzo, similar sort of question to you. I mean, what are the strategies and the initiatives that you feel work? And in terms of if you've identified these fraudsters or other criminal networks, how do you go about dismantling them?
So when you make an investigation on organized crime, in my opinion, the first thing is that you need to make an assessment of that organization. This is usually not so easy from day one of the investigation, and it's often a step-by-step process, but you need, we can say, an investigative, holistic assessment of the organization as soon as you can, an holistic strategy. The only things that works, the only kind of approach that works with organized crime is a comprehensive approach. Group thinking, it's never a plus in an investigation. Diversity of vision, it's a plus in an investigation. And when I say diversity, I mean you need to address the criminal networks from every investigative angle that you can. The other thing is that while I know it's strange to maybe listen to this from an investigator, but anyway, I think that while you are making an investigation, you are using tools and you are processing data that are affecting the life of our citizens. We have to remember that we are always accountable, and not only versus our citizens, but also during the trial. I mean, this is mostly true when it comes from an international investigation, because when you go international, you need to comply with different legal framework, not only with your one. And you have to think in advance what will be the outcome of your actions from an investigative point of view, of course, but also from a legal point of view. I like to say that the real aim of an investigation is not to arrest criminals, but it's to arrest criminals that will be able to serve a legally issued conviction. And you can get that only if you comply with the rules since day one.
I mean, Laura, there's a lot of initiatives and strategies out there. I mean, we see things as well as in criminalization and chasing money laundering. We've got police cooperation package at EU level. There's the renewed Schengen information system. Now, all of these are great systems to have in place, but where does civil society come in and what role should it be playing?
I think we come in at different places in the implementation of these policies. First of all, I think we come in as the voice of reason. We speak to our societies. We try to channel the messages that are beneficial in terms of setting up bodies, setting up institutions that can deal with these new policies. I think a common buzzword that we hear is that we don't need more institutions. We have everything we need. And if you look at asset recovery and asset management issues, what was really needed was to set up a specialized entity that deals with these issues. And I think we have been the voice of the outsider, in a way, to speak to the society, to convince the people that we really need to invest in these new areas. Civil society also comes as a part of the legislation drafting process. Civil society implements projects to work on social reuse of assets, again, making it relevant for the people, because I think it is essential that we bring these policies to the people. Working with victims, which is many times an area that we don't really look at, and talking about issues that are very practical. I'll give you an example. Talking about the need to cover the damages that are caused to the victim at a moral level, not only the damages, the material damages, the phone that she lost and, the papers that were taken away from her. So I think making things relevant for your ordinary citizen is where NGOs are really, really useful in this policy.
Lorenzo, let me come back to you, because I think what Laura's saying is very interesting and could feed into the next question for you, which is, when we look at the threat posed by organised crime, should the focus be on dismantling the groups themselves or addressing those individual crimes, and which yield better results?
So in my opinion, when you try to tackle down a criminal organization, you have always to aim to the big result. I mean, few people in a criminal organization are really fundamental. And sometimes when you arrest some of them, you realize that they've been replaced in a couple of hours. Sometimes, if you are lucky, in a couple of days. It can happen that a solid short-term result can appear more rewarding for an investigator than a long-term overall result. But I think that short-term, it's never a solution with organized crime. In the legal system where I come from, I mean the Italian legal system, starting an investigation addressing directly the criminal association, it's very easy from a legal point of view, I mean. This is not true everywhere, and this is the reason why I really appreciate the choice that Europol did choosing the high-value target system in the framework of the operational task forces. Because when you go international, as I already said, you have to comply with different legal frameworks, and it's easier to find a common legal solid ground starting an investigation on single criminals rather than directly on the criminal association. But the aim, the final aim, must be the whole group.
Johan, you said at the outset that organised crime has become a big problem in Sweden. What surprised me is that you said it hadn't always been. So how do you map this landscape, and what sort of approach do you take to tackle this sort of escalating threat? How agile do you need to be? What does the EU need to do in terms of prioritisation?
Well, it's important to see the structures. It's very fast moving, as my colleague said. They replace different companies very quickly. In Sweden, as in many countries in Europe, it's not a hierarchical organization, but networks. They move quite quickly. As we had quite a lot of successes, they moved to Europe and other parts of the world. So it's very important for us to find the right targets. But at the same time, it's also very important to find different preventive measures. For example, we have had extremely violent groups, so working with Europol in order to close down the access to handguns, for example, which is related to certain policies in different parts of the world. At the same time, finding the groups, usually these days abroad, facilitating a lot of violence. So it's both the prevention and attacking the groups from a perspective when you know who to hit. We could see, for example, big changes in short term, but still big changes in terms of hitting the right groups.
You mentioned fraud, of course. You mentioned just now firearms trafficking. I mean, within this hierarchy, we also see that we've got a new drugs agency, stronger rules there, also stronger rules on human trafficking. When it comes to these different sorts of areas, is there one that stands out for you that needs more attention, or where do they fit in terms of prevalence in Sweden?
I mean, for us, it's quite clear, I think, probably due to high levels of digitalization, that criminal networks in Sweden, drugs are important, but it's not the biggest area. It's fraud in other areas. So for us, it's more important to focus on the criminal economy, the money laundering and so forth, because there is not one, but many areas. Many networks are involved in different areas of making profit. So it makes more sense to look at the financial economy rather than a specific area where they make profits, because they change quite quickly.
Laura, I'd like to come back to you. We had last October the EU roadmap against drug trafficking and the organised crime. We also had the European Ports Alliance earlier this year that we've mentioned a couple of times already today. How do you perceive the risks of corruption in our private sector? You mentioned this in your outset, but we're talking about initiatives like these recent two. What more is needed, and is it an initiative issue, or is it, as you said earlier, a resource issue?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, but we are more advanced on setting rules at EU level and transposing them into national legislation than we are at implementing them. And I think we also need to be imaginative about how to use our rules better. As my colleagues in the panels have underlined, the financial part of crime is really key. People are replaceable, but they need the money. So if you can tackle the money, I think you're more likely to succeed. Now, how do we do that? We do it through criminal means, criminal investigation means, but we also have other tools. We have asset disclosure forms, if we're talking about the connection between organized crime and corruption. If we could help the agencies that are checking asset disclosure forms to access registries in other countries easily, EU countries first, but then also other jurisdictions, I think we can transfer some of the workload on the administrative bodies. Also, if we look at our criminal codes and criminal procedure codes, many are structured in the old way, where criminal convictions supersedes asset recovery. So if we can, and we have talked with prosecutors and investigators in many countries, and they all say, sometimes I can hurt the organization more in a financial manner through administrative sanctions than I can through criminal sanctions. This is unacceptable in 2024. We need to give our agencies the legal tools, the legal instruments to be able to be efficient, because criminals are far, far advanced. They move, they are versatile. Something doesn't work anymore, they go into another area. They're now entering procurement. They're taking away EU money. If you're looking at big infrastructure projects, I think we'll have many, many surprises. So there's space to evolve, and I think we need to think outside the box, be imaginative, work within the rules, because we are not the outlaws, we are the state, right? We need to comply with our own standards. But I think there's space to evolve, and I think there are ideas on the table. We just need to practically find ways to make them work.
Lorenzo, you said that increased criminality is more or less a symptom of society. I suppose that therefore means that you must bring all partners in society along in the fight against criminality. I know at the European Ports Alliance there was a lot of focus on how ordinary dock workers could be not just bribed into criminal activity, but threatened into it as well. How do we strike a balance in sending the message to the general public for support, as well as the need, if you like, for operational privacy or operational secrecy?
So in my opinion, it must be clear to everybody, to our citizens, what we are doing every day. Even communication is important. We have to let everybody have the perception of what is our aim. We are working for protection of our social environment, and we have to do that starting from really from every angle. There are some things that can help us, in my opinion, and I'm thinking, for example, to the use of agreement with our counterparts to get as more information as we can. We're speaking about like a European Union, about international cooperation of police, of course, not only one country making its job. When we go international, we need a steady flow of information from our counterparts. So we have several forms of judicial cooperation with third parties, with third countries. But we also need operational agreement and working agreement with third countries and third parties. We need a steady flow of information, and we have to use it to provide protection. According to the Europol report, Decoding EU Most Threatening Criminal Networks, we see that the organized crime groups are composed, 68% of the organized crime groups are composed by people of different nationalities. You cannot work on that without a steady flow of information, even from abroad. And we have also very interesting investigative tools like the operational task forces, but you need agreement to make those tools effective.
Johan, I'm going to come on to the international element, but Johan, first of all, tell me, in Sweden, what is the communication with the general public like? How do you approach that in your society?
Well, it's quite strange in a sense that the Swedish police enjoy a very high level of trust in the community, and as crime has increased, the trust has also increased. I think that's due to that we have very good level of police officers. The training is very solid, and there is a solid tradition of community policing. But I think it's also a reflection of the fact that we are needed. So for us, the trust is very important, but it's something that we want to maintain rather than increase. I think we are the most trusted agencies in the nation. So it's a lot about maintaining it, but then I think the community police and the quality of the training and the personnel we have, the Swedish state has invested quite heavily in the pay for police officers, which I think in the long run would be a good investment.
Laura, judging by your face, that's not the case everywhere.
Absolutely, unfortunately. And I think you know, the trust that the society has for its institution is very indicative about the real determination of political class to actually invest in those institutions. We can be disenchanted immediately when you see that there's no connection between what the society feels is important and what law enforcement treats as important. Yeah, if you just don't address things that are important for the society, you will find yourself alone sooner rather than later. And I think the way victims are treated is very, very important when it comes to the trust that the society has for law enforcement. And we have this very vivid debate in Romania where, you know, we're pointing fingers at each other. Whose fault is it at the end of the day? Is it the people that don't understand what the police is doing? Is it the police that doesn't explain what they're doing? Is it the resources? It's a combination, always. I mean, there's no clear cut between these issues, unfortunately.
Well, we're going to have a final round of questions, but first, are there any questions or comments from the floor? I think we have got microphones we can bring to anyone who wants to add something or ask something of our panelists. Do I see any hands? I don't. You've answered everything so well. But I will do a final wrap-up to focus again on this international element. And it's quite a big question, so feel free to go into a bit of detail. I mean, looking ahead, because we do want to look ahead, but looking at the evolving threats globally, what is lacking? What is still needed? You know, where are the current efforts? Where could they be improved? Laura?
So again, coming from an anti-corruption angle, I would like to see more in the area of sharing of information between administrative bodies. I think we have invested a lot into building systems for criminal investigation bodies. We have nothing on the administrative front, and there the importance of getting the evidence legally is equally important as it is in criminal investigations. Cases that are built on, can you give me something that I cannot access in your jurisdictions, are going to fall in court. And if they fail, they will be a big disappointment for the society.
Menzo, same question to you, internationally particularly. What do we need going forward?
There are a lot of data around in the world, and sometimes it happens that private partners have a major access to data compared to the public institutions. I think that, going back to what I already said, agreements and operational agreements, working agreements, and any kind of agreements that can allow us to get as more information as you can, it will be key. A key process, I mean, to get to the solution. As already said, we are accountable in the way we process this data. We have to remember also that. And, but this doesn't mean that we don't have to do that. And I think that also as countries of this union, we must learn to share as much information as we can. Everybody of us has a knowledge of the criminal society, I mean, the organized crime and the terrorism and everything that is affecting our country. And I'd like to think that that will be one day in which everybody will share it immediately as soon as we get it. I think that this is that this will be already something very important.
Johan, what do we need to focus on for the, well, not necessarily the next 25 years, but say the next 5 to 10?
As many pointed out, I mean, information needs to be shared. I absolutely agree. It's not only law enforcement. There needs to be a lot more done when it comes to administrative measures. But also international, I would say for us, Europol is very important in, it's not only where we cooperate with other European countries, it's also where we meet other international partners, and for that to develop in terms of, because we can see that many of us have interest in the same countries. We do talk to them bilaterally, certain countries, and I think we can do more together as the European Union to get more information and a better flow with other third countries.
Well, I think stronger together, that's a very good place to finish our first panel. So please, a round of applause for our speakers. Well, thank you all very much. I think we've set the scene a little bit with the focus there on organised crime. Our next panel, we're going to consider many of the same elements, of course, increased digitalisation, the international and the global context, but we're going to focus on counteracting terrorism and radicalisation, something that is, of course, hugely relevant in the digital age. We're going to look at the context of online radicalisation, highlighting the role of social media. Encrypted messaging platforms, we heard there of some frustration in getting access to data, and encrypted messaging platforms can exacerbate that. The internet at large in facilitating extremist ideologies, and that there is now no longer one size fits all, and the current threats and what might be the future actions we can embark on together. So dovetailing very, very well with our first panel. So we will have to join us. Please join me on stage. Manuel Navarrete, head of the Spanish Intelligence Center for Counterterrorism and Organised Crime. Anna Stjolberg is the head of the European Counter-Terrorism Centre in The Hague, and Maura Conway is Professor of Government and International Studies in the School of Law and Government at DCU, Dublin City University in Ireland. Thank you very much for joining us. You heard, of course, the first panel probably setting out a lot of what we will echo and put a little different twist on, but certainly reinforce some of the same messages, I'm sure. Now, in the last 25 years since inception of Europol, there have been some horrifying seismic events that have affected us globally and here in Europe. We have 9/11, the Madrid bombings in 2004. In 2015, 2016, we had the attacks in Paris and here in Brussels. So do you think there's been an evolution in the modus operandi of terrorism in those last 25 years? And perhaps you could highlight those changes and how Europol, the EU in general, and member states have evolved alongside it to try and counteract that new operating procedure. Manuel, I'll let you start.
Well, thank you, Anne. Thank you and good morning. I need her touch, obviously. Well, thank you and good morning again. It's really a pleasure to celebrate here for the Commissioner, also the 25 years that, of Europol. Still fresh in my memory, the suffering of, you mentioned 9/11, the 11 of March attacks in Madrid, in July in London, 2005, and many attacks that we suffer. And also the victims of these terrorist attacks. I think one of the driving force for all the security forces or the city community is to serve the victims. So I think this is why we are here and why we are making our daily life fighting against terrorism. Indeed, there had been an evolution. I think we were confronted by the major challenge on 9/11, where we faced a very, very sophisticated attack planned by Al-Qaeda. And we were taken by surprise, I have to say. The intelligence service, the law enforcement, the judiciary was taken by surprise how strong, how sophisticated, how aggressive they can be. And we suffer this attack later on in our own territory in Europe. So I have to say that the intelligence community and the law enforcement and the judiciary, we reacted very fast. And I mentioned, we reacted very fast. We went to a different dimension right now. We reacted preparing, enhancing information sharing, trying to identify as soon as possible this, and we focus on preventing sophisticated attacks, because the main threat was that Al-Qaeda, Daesh, or all the franchise of Al-Qaeda can again attack any territory, the European Union, and also their own territory. But we have to bear in mind that Al-Qaeda and Daesh are killing more people throughout the world, not only in Europe, because we have most Muslim people assassinated by Al-Qaeda and Daesh than any other kind. So this is something that they are suffering too. So they managed to have this sophistication, and through the cooperation that we have in Europe, also with the US, for many countries that we have the same challenge, we managed to stop this sophistication. Daesh also was a new trend that we faced it, and they tried to hold territory in Syria and Iraq. And again, through a combination of intelligence, law enforcement, judiciary, and some action that took place over there, we reduced, I think, the threat coming from this. And now we are confronted with a new, the so-called lone actors phenomenon. People that they are usually using internet, they are self-radicalized, they have access to specific digest propaganda, and they perpetrate attacks. The good news that the less sophistication, more difficult for them to produce large number of victims. One single victim is enough for us to be worried about. But the good news that we have now more possibilities to identify them and to prevent. So we move from reacting to prevent terrorist attack right now.
Anna, to come to you, I mean, my family's from Belfast, and I grew up in the 70s and 80s with the threat of terrorism. And in my perception, it is incredibly different now. Is that just my perception, or is it quantifiably different?
Yeah, I would say we had development, of course, also in this crime area, as we also heard the colleagues explain about the organized crime, actually. So it goes hand in hand, because we have the change in the technology communication and the development within the technology communication, and how information travels and transfers between. In our case, if you look at the radicalization, finding groups, cells with shared narratives and ideologies, we used to have it locally, physically. They used to meet. When I started countering terrorism back home in Sweden at the Swedish Security Service, when we knew about the data, we knew where they were, we could locate. And also we could focus on collecting data to get more information, and to try to understand the intention and the capacity. Now we don't have it so locally anymore, so now it has moved online, and we call it now the digital campfires, actually, where we have the encryption, the anonymity, the outreach. It's global. And it's very, very fast. We can see that we can have Quran burnings in one country, and then less than 24 hours we can have an attack on an embassy on the other side of the world. So it travels very fast. Also the duration, I would say, when you put something in the internet, it stays on the internet. Even though we're working as hard as we can to find the terrorist content and also be able to remove this kind of content and the hate message. And then again, we have the algorithmic enhancement that actually make the reach out in another way. So where we used to find the one that sended the narratives, the ideologic. We met physically. Now the campfire is digitally, and you don't have to look for the campfire. The campfire actually find you. And I would say that is the biggest challenge and the biggest change.
I think in the tech world, we tend to call this the 3 V's, the volumes, the vector, and the velocity with which that information is shared. Maura, same question to you. Give us an assessment, if you like, of where we are now, what has changed, and what needs to change in terms of the fight against terrorism.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So I guess for me, one of the things that I wanted to draw attention to, and Anna has already spoken a little bit to this with the mention of speed and what have you. And you were talking, Anna, about the speed with which the information now goes around the world. For me, I guess another aspect of this is the very fast-changing nature of the internet itself. So we've seen not just a shift, if you like, from the major activity in the terrorist space being in the physical space. And obviously, when it comes to terrorism, the physical space is still absolutely crucial, because that's where terrorism actually takes place. But what we have seen is a really significant change in terms of the pace of change of the internet that has also impacted upon terrorism. So when I first began to do research in this space, my focus was on websites. And then changes came in the internet over time that changed all of our focuses, right, in terms of our work. So there's a shift from websites to chat forums, to social media, to messaging applications, to the decentralized web, for example. Those are types of online spaces. But then you could also think about the tools and technologies. So what we see, for example, happening is that terrorists have gone from using text, as we know, in the most basic way, to video, to live streaming, to the use of cryptocurrencies, to NFTs, and to generative AI. So these changes have taken place really quite rapidly. Probably nobody remembers now, but on the 29th of November, 2022, right, that was the day before ChatGPT was released into the wild, as it were. Well, on the day before, what we were all focused on when it came to the future of online terrorism was the metaverse. But the next day, literally, our focus changed wholesale to the threats posed by Gen AI. So I guess the takeaway I have from this is that we always need to be cognizant of this really fast pace of change, both of the technology, and my interest is in online technologies, but more broadly, and also the fast pace of change actually in the terrorism scene. And when you put those two things together, then you've got two very fast-changing things, if you like, and it's quite hard to get a handle on them. And so you always need to be thinking about what's next, but you always need also to be taking a 360-degree view of the threat landscape in order to try and stay ahead of things.
Well, we saw a very chilling example of generative AI just before our first panel. Manuel, before we move on to getting into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the digital side of things, tell me, in general, what are the current means of intelligence sharing between the different actors, the EU, and what EU policies can really help support that? So from a policy point of view, what have we got currently in place, and how do you want to see this cooperation evolve?
Well, I think beside that, we have an increase, dramatic increase of information sharing, and also what we share on all the European countries, intelligence and different modus operandi of terrorist attacks or terrorist new trends. Also, we monitor hybrid threats, which also could be, because we know that terrorism can be used also as a vehicle for destabilizing government or states using different methods. So I think after the attack that we suffered in 9/11 and in Europe, we strongly believe that we need a policy for fighting terrorism. It means that we need to have a strategy. As I mentioned, we moved from reaction to prevention. And now we have, in every single European country, especially European Union, we have a new strategy. We have a strategy have been renewed when we see the need to incorporate new indicators or new trends coming from terrorism. These include that intelligence is playing an essential role on that. And I think that now the discussion taking place inside the intelligence community, the law enforcement community, within the working groups of the European Union, within the European Commission, now is a driving force for the policy on CT. So before we were just trying to find a magic solution from every single attack that we have. We're trying to find a way to finish this as soon as possible. But what we need to have is a solid policy and to believe in the pillars, the 7 pillars mentioned by the Secretary Director Catherine de Waal, that we have in the European Union. So it's essential that this flow of information comes from the operational side to the technical side, and the political level is moving and is really making the policy more solid to fight against terrorism.
Anna, a sort of same question from you, because you have, if you like, a more horizontal view from the EU, and I think 2016 was the Europol Counterterrorism Centre was set up. So you've had some time to assess this, and there's also the CCC, the Cybercrime Centre as well. And what are you seeing happening between member states? Are they communicating properly? Are they all playing the game? Are they doing that in a timely way?
I would say today international cooperation is daily business. It needs to be. So it's not rare, and we need to cooperate all the time. What we have to do is move further, I guess, from bilateral cooperation to using more platform. And this is what we also would like to achieve. We heard the director talking about the pillars of Europol, and creating this information hub is crucial, I would say, to having this kind of platform. Because it used to be known threat data, and sharing this kind of data, that's, I would say, yesterday's news. What we need now is to connect all the data, and now we have a large amount of data. So using, I would say, Europol as a platform, it's a good benefit for the member states, and the most important added value to have an overview and understanding of the threat, finding the threat, understanding the phenomena, trends, and also prevent the threat actor for actually committing the worst crime. So yes, I believe we can do more, but we have very dedicated member states. We have very good cooperation with third parties. Europol is a platform not only for the 27 member states, but it should be our focus to have this overview and also independency in what is happening to European security.
Maura, within the context of the DSA, the Digital Services Act, and the Terrorist Content Online Regulation, we have actually some pretty robust legislative tools here in the EU. And of course, with the Brussels effect, we may see that that legislation, if you like, approach, or legislative approach, exported around the world. But how can something like the EU Internet Forum, its public-private partnership, what sort of role does it play when it comes to actually concretely dealing with threats? Because legislation is legislation with teeth, but maybe sometimes more self-regulation has less teeth and is therefore not taken as seriously.
Yeah, so absolutely. Just to underline that the TICO, so the Terrorist Content Online Regulation, the DSA, the Digital Services Act, also the forthcoming AI Act, are all formal regulatory mechanisms, as you've pointed out, Jennifer, that have real teeth, as it were. And this is plainly very important. But I think there's definitely still also a role for more informal mechanisms, such as the EU Internet Forum, which was set up in 2015, which is a public-private partnership, as was just mentioned. And basically, and I mean this in quite a positive way, let me say, it's kind of a talking shop, if you like, with respect to precisely online violent extremism and terrorism, and also actually more recently a range of other digital harms. And what it does is it brings together the European Commission, so relevant commissioners and their DG. It brings together technology companies, so private companies who are absolutely active and major players in this space. And then a variety of other actors from broadly civil society, including people like myself, who are researchers in this space. And when it was initially established in 2015, I guess I would say that it was an opportunity for the Commission, the member states, the technology companies to kind of feel each other out, I would say, on the major issues in this space at that time. And in the early days, actually probably in the early years, to be fair, there was a major focus on the so-called Islamic State and their online activity, which was very significant at that time and very impactful in terms of having real-world impacts, real physical violence and terrorist attacks arising out of their virtual networking and connectivity and what have you. And what we discussed was, you know, appropriate responses with all these different actors. What I will say is that I think, too, that a lot of the parties at that time maybe were a little bit suspicious of each other and were maybe a little bit concerned with what the other actors' motives might be, for example. And they probably had a right to be. But I think what we can see emerged out of this, and this goes to something that Catherine de Bolle said earlier about people getting together, sitting down together, thrashing out the issues on some particular quite specific topic, and generating trust in that process. And I think that is what occurred within the EU-IF context. And what we can see arising out of it is a bunch of different initiatives, up to including, I would say, the terrorist content online regulation. So we started in an informal space and we got to a much more formal space. I will say finally that I don't think because the TICO, the DSA and what have you are now, you know, being implemented, that the EUIF is going to go away or should go away. On the contrary, I think a lot of, trust has been built up in that space. I think a lot of knowledge has been generated out of it, and it continues to have a pretty crucial role because it's a place where you can begin to talk about emerging issues, whether it's the metaverse, whether it's Gen AI, or whatever the next thing is that we don't actually know about yet, but which will sort of burst onto the scene. And so we need spaces where all of the different actors who are tasked in this area can speak and have a trusted forum in which to discuss these issues.
Well, yes, as our opening speaker said, it takes a network to fight a network. To continue with this theme, if you like, of future-proofing and trying to look ahead and preempt, if you like, certain developments. You mentioned generative AI. There's also things like 3D printed weapons. There's malicious use of drones. All sorts of technological developments that we perhaps could not have predicted, although I'm sure some experts certainly did predict them, but they're maybe not front of mind. There's also, Anna, the nature of geopolitical events and predicting what's going to happen there. We've touched on earlier in the opening remarks that the current situation in Israel, the subsequent war in Gaza, the Hamas attacks from last October, from October 2023, and the ongoing strife there. Has that shifted the radicalization in the online environment as well? And does it constitute a major leverage event in terms of the field of counterterrorism, in terms of what you need to focus on? And how can one predict such events? It's a very multi-part question, so if you take it apart as you wish.
Yeah, it's not easy to answer. Of course, it's a very complex problem, and it's also connected with the development that we have talked about on the technology, on internet, and also the different shades of trying to identify different narratives and ideologies. But of course, we can see that this crisis in the Middle East, the war in Gaza, the Hamas attack on Israel, the 7th of October, will have an effect on European security in some way. And this is important for us, of course, together with the member state, to assess the situation constantly. We have seen dissemination of propaganda, the Al-Aqsa flood campaign. Of course, also targets mainly European, Israel and Jewish interests. That has been a focus, but we have also seen connection with the IS and Al-Qaeda propaganda with the anti-West narrative perspective. So, of course, it is affecting, but beyond also the jihadist groups, we have seen that Hamas propaganda motivate old and new anti-Semitic narratives. So in the context of the radicalization in the society today, the outreach and where the campfires look for the vulnerable and young people, and we have seen very, very young people. We have cases in Europe, and this is a not good development at all, of course, where they find a coherent worldview. So both in the jihadist sphere, the white supremacy, but also violent left-wing and anarchism. So this creates this kind of hybrid ideologies and the salad bar of extremism. So I would say this is something we need to monitor closely.
Manuel, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this as well, the so-called salad bar, particularly with regard to minors, often very young teenagers are being radicalized. How do we approach this? What do we do? I mean,
Well, I think that just to go a little bit deeper on what was mentioned before about the different actions, I think that the European Union members and the intelligence and Europol will very soon realize that working on the internet against terrorism was an essential key. In fact, the IIU, the Internet Referral Unit, was set up in 2015, even before the CTC. So online activity was a key issue that we want to address. And I think that going to prevent radicalization on the internet, especially with minors, the European Union made a kind of unprecedented alignment of forces. Now I'm thinking of it sounds like a Star Wars, unprecedented alignment of forces, because we have intelligence, we have law enforcement, we have judiciary, we have also the industry, you mentioned, the providers, the researchers, and the political level in the same table discussing how to face terrorism online. And I think we work in 4 different dimensions. First is about a voluntary cooperation with the open source provider, especially try to make them aware that they are victims of terrorism, but also they have a role to play when the terrorists try to exploit the platforms. And especially now talking about the minors, because we understand now how the terrorists are trying to narrow down a specific message on minors to be recruited and to be radicalized. The second line is that we also need to have some kind of regulation. This is the TICO, the TCO. Now we have in place a regulation where the companies have to have one single point for law enforcement connection. They have a specific mandate to do, and also the member state can connect to the platform created by Europol, PERSI, where the practitioners, the law enforcement, and also the companies are connected to. So it's very easy for us to really send these requests. and the removal order in this case to this one. And it's working quite well. I mentioned about the Hamas crisis. We are using this to also defeat the propaganda coming from Hamas in these cases. We have also this public partnership cooperation, which is private cooperation, which is essential to do so. We notice that now there are new tools they are trying to promote for recruiting minors. We are watching very close to gaming, because I mean they are using this. And artificial intelligence, they are used to recycle and to prepare games to attract the young people to have, in a very short time, a very intense life. I mean, when I speak like, I was already a police officer when Europol was launching 25 years ago. I know the people we are working in that area, we still have to adapt to this new technology, but now young people can have an intense life in 2-3 years, because they can have a new identity, they can join a specific group, so they can be very intense. This is why the terrorists are exploiting. In fact, we are now testing if they can use artificial intelligence models to recruit the minors, because we know how eager they are for this new technology. So we also need to talk with the industry and also to monitor the activity of the terrorists in order to minimize the impact of artificial intelligence on specifically recruiting minors for terrorist purpose.
Mara, I'd like you also to reflect a bit on this, if you like, a la carte extremism. We talked about, for example, right-wing extremism, something obviously we see a concern with the upcoming EU elections. We talked about, naturally, jihadi extremism. There's also incel ideology and a sort of smorgasbord of different things that can get all mixed up. And how do you approach that challenge when it's not straightforward to the outsider where it's coming from?
Yeah, so I'm going to say two quite contrary things now. Let me draw people's attention to another day before. So that was the 6th of October 2023, right? And on the 6th of October 2023, we were very much focused on what sometimes we call, somewhat wrongly, I think, new terrorism, right? So we were focused on, in particular, looking forward, what was going to happen next, salad bar type extremism and terrorism, for example. We were also still quite focused, and we should remain so, I think, on the so-called Islamic State and other violent jihadist organizations. But we weren't so focused, I think, any longer on what we sometimes call in terrorism studies old terrorist organizations. And so I think this goes to my point about keeping an open mind, having a 360-degree view, because old terrorism emerged back onto the scene on 7 October in a very significant way. Not that it had gone away. So this goes to another point, which is to say, I also don't think we should take our eye off of violent jihadi organizations, especially those that are operating right now outside of the European Union context, because, and I know today we're focused on the EU and internal security, we could find ourselves dealing with them, as we have done previously, in a European Union context. So the Commissioner, for example, mentioned ISKP, so Islamic State Khorasan province, for example, that has already manifested itself within the European Union context. And there are other violent jihadi organizations that have also recently called for attacks within the EU context, not just ISKP, other violent jihadi groups, linking it also to the situation in Israel, Palestine at the present time. But I guess the contrary part of this is that I drew attention to sort of old terrorist organizations. So Hamas is quite a traditional terrorist outfit. It's a group as traditionally understood. So-called Islamic State is actually a hybrid type of entity, right? There are traditional type aspects to it, and then there are also very networked type aspects to it. And then there is definitely a third type of activity that's emergent at the present time, and that's this more tailored type of extremism and terrorism that we're witnessing. And what we're referring to here, I guess, is people, users online, picking and choosing different aspects of ideologies and tailoring a unique ideology, oftentimes just for themselves personally, or for themselves and a small group of others that they're in contact either in the real world or in virtual settings, or indeed in both. These ideologies, or what emerges out of this, isn't something that fits on the traditional left-right spectrum. It's a mishmash oftentimes of left ideology, right-wing ideology. You mentioned incel ideology, so very misogynistic ideas and what have you. Jihadi ideology oftentimes mixed into this. And so I guess what I would say about this is it's very much a product of the internet, because it wouldn't really be possible in a traditional group physical setting as previously understood for somebody to have this kind of an approach. If you're going to join a traditional terrorist organization, you have to commit wholly to whatever the core tenets of their ideology are. So I guess for me, an important aspect of this is, again, for us to keep our eyes on online is quite important. On online communities, extremist communities, on the technologies that they're using, on the ideas that they're promulgating, even on their aesthetics, for example, and how these things are combining at the present time in very disparate ways that are then emergent in the violent extremism and terrorism scenes in combinations and ways that it may be difficult to foresee. But if we actually have a handle on these scenes, on these communities, then we are better placed to be able to, determine what might happen in the future.
Anna, there's a lot to unpack there. We talked about Israel, Gaza, the Middle East more generally, perhaps even with the war in Ukraine, looking further east. Anna, how important is it that there is sufficient intelligence from beyond the EU borders, and what are the particular challenges there? In particular, I'm thinking online, are there linguistic barriers, and therefore you have issues with resourcing? Talk us through the hurdles and what you think might be best practices to overcome them.
Yeah, we used to divide law enforcement and intelligence in the past, but I would say moving now on more online, and there is so many digital footprints out there. Before we had too little data. Now I guess we have too much data, and we need to be able to process this data. We need to be able to connect this data, and that's why we need to provide this in the information hub, as I spoke about before, and having that kind of ID and also have the right technology, but even the latest technology doesn't perform good on bad data. So our focus need also to have the right data, very good data, good quality data. So this is something that we need to build upon, but then also at the same time we need to continue working with the cases we actually have. So this is also why I believe I really find it very good opportunity to be at Europol in working on these matters together with my colleagues at Europol and at the ECTC, where we actually can, as Maura mentioned, monitoring the propaganda, targeting the terrorist content, but also be able to remove the terrorist content. We have the opportunity, Manuel spoke about it also before here, to have this referral action day. Very important. We do that together with the member states, where we have basis on the TCO regulation. But we also provide tailor-made operational support. Also very good, together with the member states, we provide also platforms, thematic platforms, we call it within my center, the Terrorist Identification Task Force. We can also provide operational task force, focusing, getting the member states together with their investigations, connecting their data, both investigative data, but also intelligence data, because all of this data needs to be added and connected. When we become this information hub and have this overview that we actually can, together with the member states' data, together with the monitoring of the propaganda, we can also support with strategic reporting, both strategic reporting in terms of explaining the threat. We have the TSAT reports that we publish yearly about the terrorist threat in Europe, but also other thematic report and restricted report to the member states, because I believe it's very important to have the right overview, the situational picture, to be able to do preventive measures. So, yeah, I would say that's the important way forward.
And looking forward, our next panel is going to be a deep dive onto data. Before I just ask a wrap-up question, any questions from the floor? Anybody want to ask something or have a burning point to make? I see one hand here at the back and another one here just in the second row. So I think we'll get a microphone to the back a little bit quicker and then down to the front.
Thank you so much. My name is Alexander Jan. I'm coming from Interpol Federal and International Police Organization Academy. I would like to make my question so simple and easy regarding the communication between or cooperation between Europol and other organizations as well. I would like to ask about the relationship between the Europol and the police
one of the panelists, you meet her. From Europol. I've only one question. I spoke to you were on the lecture that give some introductory statements. A couple of minutes, but was listening now to this panel, you prefer the, let's say, more the question answer period. That would be, by the way, my second chapter. 12:40 to catch the train. So don't worry if I really will sneak out after. Okay. Yeah. And I plan to finish on time. Okay. Yeah, that's a new way to, that's to me. This opening is to everyone. Yeah. So they would elaborate on three elements. Availability, which was already a very old one. Now on the new principles following, let's say, the latest investigations and results, and the principle of accessibility, so having access to data, and then the principle of usability, to do something with a big amount of data. So that would be things I would like to touch there. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that one.
You've just, yeah.
I'll not do it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please make your way back into the auditorium, we will start in just a few minutes with our final panel. So please grab your coffee quickly and come back into the main room. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats quickly so we can resume our panel discussions. If everyone could grab a seat quickly, we will be able to get the final panel underway very, very shortly. Please do take a seat. So, ladies and gentlemen, while I appreciate the imperative of coffee and networking, we are on a very tight deadline today as people have flights to catch. So thank you all very much. I hope you've had a good caffeinated break because we are hitting our final panel, which I know from our previous discussions is probably the most anticipated. We've been talking about data, and we are now going to specifically look at data at a crossroads and Europol as a hub against crime and indeed a hub for sharing that data in a meaningful way, because it's not just about the volume of data, it's about being able to access, it's about usability. So we're going to discuss that we're going to encompass, I think, a lot of what we covered in our previous panels, but really with a focus on looking to the future. So I am delighted to have joining us for this panel Olivier Onidi, who is Deputy Director General, Internal Security Directorate, and Chair of Going Dark, and he will tell us more about that in a moment. Jürgen Ebner is Europol Deputy Executive Director of Governance. Luisa Proença is Deputy National Director of the Portuguese Judicial Police, and Vanessa Fransen is from the University of Liège and a researcher in the field of cybercrime, EU criminal law, economic crime, national and comparative criminal law, and criminal procedure. Vanessa, that's quite a mouthful. Thank you all very much. Olivier, let me start with you. Set us out, give us a few opening words to explain where we're at and what have been the steps that have been taken.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm very impressed by the audience today, not only on the first row, but all the successive rows. Now, I think I wanted maybe to say a few words of context to explain how we actually came to this important recognition that Europol was our information hub. I think under the previous commission we started, and the emphasis was very much at how to make the best use of information that was available in existing EU large-scale tools. Schengen information system, and looking at this also trying to close gaps in setting essential new systems, entry-exit, pre-authorization, ETIAS, etc., but with a strong emphasis on making sure that all the information that was actually collected was able to be accessible and used. In doing this, we already made sure that Europol could not only get access to the different information systems, but could start playing an active role, including in feeding these systems and also responding to clear requests, like in the context, for example, of the management of pre-authorization of ETIAS. Second step under this commission was very much to look at how to facilitate at the European level the exchange of information between law enforcement authorities, so all the individuals who are in this room, and at the same time also allowing the capability at European level to have a modern, effective, analytical also function in order to translate all these data in actionable information. And this is what led us to review the regulation of Europol, very much based on some of the success stories. Notably, remember the Fraternité Task Force, where really in a terrible context of a terrorist attack, member states took the like unprecedented also decision just to push all the information they had. Everything, containers of information. So we needed, through a regulation, to ensure that we had not only the legal means, but also the actual competence and resources for Europol to play that essential role in managing all these sources of information. Beyond Europol, we looked at the way national authorities were handling information, and that led us to have new directive on information exchange, which again set Europol at the center, because Siena, the secured channel to convey information, was chosen as the reference system to do this between law enforcement authorities. We reviewed fundamentally the PRIM framework. It's not about only automated data search. It is effectively a new framework that allows all police records to be accessible by all member states. And we also looked at some specific aspects access to central bank account registries because of the prime onus on financial investigation, and equally also travel information with the modernization of the API framework and the PNR framework. So with this, we had like a very, very dynamic context where information was not only available through a central system, but we also had the capacity to make all of us mutually the best use of this. And in doing this, I think Europol for us was first and foremost an engineer. Jürgen doesn't have an engineer background, but many in Europol are versed into technical aspects, building Siena, but also the innovation lab that we managed to create within Europol, and all the absolute essential technical expertise we know, because data today is about technology. So that was the first. Second, with Europol, we had the European analyst, so to say, and the capacity really to have at European level a possibility to crunch big data and to translate this data into useful information for investigations, and this at the request of any of the EU members. Third, with Europol at the center of this new information web, Europol was also a very important referee for us because this is also the reason why we gave competence to Europol to activate and feed some systems with information. We wanted to make sure that we closed all the gaps in having a central body which was like guaranteeing us that all the pertinent information would be used and also pushed to those who are in need of this information. And finally, Europol is also the essential gatekeeper for information exchange with third countries, and this has also launched a new wave of negotiations in order to allow to exchange personal data with a number of countries around us, first and foremost, of course, Latin America, with the prime concern on being more active on drugs. So these are like the essential functions which basically direct to Europol or confer Europol with this very important responsibility as an information hub. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go, Jürgen, to you and tell us a bit about the capacities and the evolution of Europol with increased responsibilities. How have you looked at to change your capabilities and your capacities within Europol? Because, as we've heard, there's an explosion in data, and therefore there has to be a commensurate explosion in resourcing.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you also, Olivier, for highlighting, let's say, the most important legal developments also in the last years. I have had the pleasure that I used to work already at Europol from 2002 to 2006. So I saw a baby growing into a school child that went into the elementary school, and by then, let's say, the main focus of Europol was simply to facilitate the information exchange, somehow, put it very blunt. That's it, full stop. That was by then. However, and I think this should be also important to be mentioned, already by then, in 2005, there was in the so-called The Hague program, the principle of availability developed. That means that there was a clear intention of the police to share as many data as possible. And for this, of course, you need a channel to share information. And this is, as you quite rightly mentioned, nowadays Siena. Not to forget, already now, 1.8 million messages a year, 3,000 police officers connected, so really a powerful tool. But I think what is important to mention also when it comes to the principal availability, that also under the current commissioner and the Commission's work, and you mentioned all of this, it developed extremely good because, first and foremost, the Information Exchange Directive, where Siena will become the information channel by default, based on case management systems that are already existing in member states that have to be implemented. There we assume that only via this, the exchange of information will beef up to 5 million messages a year. That means by this is self-explanatory that, let's say, the databases and the data to be analyzed by Europol will be also clearly increasing. So the principle of availability definitely paid off, but what we learned, for example, from the current investigations we had supported in the last years, which is Sky ECC, EncroChat, Anom, is beside all these operational successes, thousands of arrests, 1 billion of assets seized, and of course, a lot of operational successes exist, but it shows us two elements, and you mentioned them already, where we might have to think about how to develop this further. This would be the principle of accessibility, so how to get into the data that is available there. And you mentioned this also, that this is a question on the principle of usability. Because nowadays police work, from our understanding, is less the issue of that there is not enough data. The issue, the pressing issue is there's a lot of data that has to be accessed first technically, explored, analyzed, and then to find out of the, and I think Anna spoke about the haystack of data, to extract the relevant data. And we always should have in mind, this is not only data for a certain anonymous way, there might be data of people that are threatened to be killed. There's data of childs that are somehow exploited and in very miserable situations. So data where you have to act very quickly. And this brings us definitively later, and I hope that we come back to this, to the necessary discussion to use technical tools. So to use artificial intelligence to analyze data in a more faster, more precise way. And with these three elements, I think we should develop further the idea from the principle of availability, accessibility, so explore data, and use data, the usability. These are the three elements where we believe from Europol's side, and our executive director mentioned this, to develop the information hub function to offer even more agile operational support, but there are some preconditions necessary to this.
Louisa, let's stay with these questions of evolution. I mean, we've seen an evolution in terms of the amount of data. We've seen an evolution in the digital tools that might be used to analyze it and the sophistication of data sets. Do we also need an evolution in the way we're thinking about crime prevention and policing? I think we mentioned sort of crime prevention as a service. What sort of ways should we be looking to the future?
Well, thank you for the question. And first of all, let me congratulate Mrs. Bolle and Europol for the 25th anniversary. Well, we have spoken about data and all the differences that have been arising in the crime scene. The digital transition brought huge challenges for law enforcement agencies, and well, it's needed to look at the technology, as you have mentioned before, and we have to develop ways of doing it. And Europol has done also a huge role, a very relevant role, having the vision and working with all law enforcement agencies from all member states in order to prepare all the way towards the adoption of new technologies, thinking of AI, for instance. Well, I think we have to prepare from the technological part of the scene, because as there is security as a service, there is crime as a service, so we have to prepare for that. And innovation, I think, is the only way. We need to be all together having the same or balanced capabilities, new profiles, new ways of recruiting the best people, the best brains to work in police forces. We have to engage with a close cooperation with universities in order to be able to attract the best people, to make the activities in law enforcement agencies more attractive, better paid, I would say. But of course we have a way and a very huge task in front in order to adopt new technologies, emergent technologies, benefiting the prevention and the criminal investigation.
Well, we heard Johan on the first panel saying the Swedish police are played very well, and it reflects in terms of how well they can do their job. We've also had universities, more on the last panel, and Vanessa. Give us your perspective. Tell us about the status quo as you see the current situation. We've talked about the evolution and the steps we've taken to put the frameworks that we have in place. But tell us how you view it now.
Thank you very much. I take, of course, a view from criminal procedure, as that is my main field of research. And so a lot has been achieved over the past years, for instance, in terms of accessibility of data. There's the e-evidence regulation that has been adopted that provides for cross-border production and preservation orders. That's definitely a major achievement that tries to strike a balance between the needs that law enforcement is confronted with and fundamental rights. But I think there's still a lot of work on the table, if I may say so. Mentioning that there's a lot of data available, that AI tools are probably needed to analyze those data. That raises questions in terms of fundamental rights. How about the right of defense, for instance? How much access will there be to the tools that have been used and that eventually lead to data that go into the case file? There's some national case law evolving in this area, but it's not easy because there's, of course, a tension between secrecy of the investigations and the rights of the defense. So how much can you disclose? Obviously, we cannot disclose investigative tools and measures of the police, but on the other hand, how make it possible for the defense to check whether the data's integrity has been respected, whether data has not been taken out of context. That's just one thing. The EncroChat case has been mentioned. As many of you know, obviously, I assume the Court of Justice ruled in the EncroChat case in just one of many cases that are pending at national and at EU level on this EncroChat case. And we see in this ruling the limits of EU law, I think, because the case is really focused on the legality conditions. The data was requested by Germany after the French authorities had intercepted them. Eurojust had said to the other member state, there may be data that is of interest to you, other member states. And then Germany acted upon this and requested data that had already been collected. Data that was then transferred through Europol servers. So we see there's accessibility of data. Data went to Germany, and then the German courts asked themselves the question, but how can we assess the integrity of the data, whether the data is reliable, since the defense doesn't have access to the mother file? And the Court of Justice said, no, we look into the requirements of the EIO, the European Investigation Orders. And so EU law cannot solve everything. And in that case, in that judgment, the Court of Justice really outlines the important role that national courts still have. But I think we are moving forward and we're looking for solutions that need to come from the EU level, but also from national courts that need to be aware also of the tools that they have. And these are just two examples.
Thank you. Olivier, let me come back to you, and before we get into the whole privacy debate as well, because naturally privacy in the EU is a fundamental right, and we don't want to be North Korea, so this is what we are fighting to defend, as it were. But one of the outcomes of the Lisbon Declaration was the setting up of this high-level group. You're co-chair, Olivier, so tell us, update us on the progress that has been made and talk us through the strategic direction. I know you've talked about the steps to get to where we are, but give us an update on that and also the main challenges and what is needed to close any legal or policy gaps as highlighted by Vanessa.
No, behind this initiative that led to the setting up of a high-level expert group, you have the fundamental additional step, which is how to ensure the access of data which is held by private actors. We've sorted out and we've set up the overall framework for the data amongst authorities to be used in the best possible way. Now we need to ensure that data absolutely essential in the context of investigation or judicial procedures actually accessible, and this, of course, the recipients of those data are private actors. With the e-evidence framework, we have embedded in law procedures that need to be followed, but we haven't resolved the actual access of this data in at least 3 dimensions. The first one is making sure that we have rules that mandate the conservation of data. long discussions at EU level. We are gifted to have a jurisprudence that is recently much more helpful, that opens up new ways of doing this. And the first building block really of the high-level expert group work was actually to achieve, and for me this is quite a major success, achieve a very strong consensus of the need to have a European framework in order to codify the obligations in terms of data conservation for all private actors. And that's an additional element of difficulty we have. If there are a number of rules on traditional telecommunication operators, those rules are less clear or are non-existent on other new actors, which are basically conveying the bulk of the data that is pertinent nowadays. Second, consensus here as well of a legal nature is the fact that we need a framework at EU level in order to allow lawful interception. So basically using data in real time. Here again, difficulty because of the nature of the actors that are different, but difficulty because the rules in national jurisdictions are not compatible and hence lead to a major problem of receivability and acceptance in courts. So there as well, different views as to how prescriptive this legal framework needs to be, but very strong consensus on the fact that yes, indeed, interception are important, and for interceptions to be possible, we need this legal framework as well. Third, very strong consensus is the fact that the technology evolving and everybody acknowledging the importance of moving ever forward in better protecting private communications and private data. There is an absolute necessity to invest jointly in capabilities. Why? Because a few years now, authorities are at loss. There used to be times where authorities were quite comfortable in their technical capabilities to exploit the vulnerabilities or always to be ahead of criminals or ahead of the private entities that are developing solutions to protect communication. This is no longer the case, and this is not a European issue. It is very much an international issue when you speak with American colleagues, etc. So really a priority and a cry from the heart of all the experts is to say we really need not only to build capabilities, but to mutualize this. And that was some already of the actions we've taken, again, with the help of Europol, developing this decryption platform in the joint research centers, etc. But it's not enough. The technology evolves so quickly. So capabilities in terms of having the expertise, the tools, etc. In doing this, there is also, and that is for me the most difficult, but also the most fundamental new step that has been taken in the context of the recommendations that the experts are formulating to us. The expression that from the initial stage of conceptualizing a way of protecting data, there needs to be also a reflection on how to be able to allow lawful access. So how to be able to respond to national authorities warranted by, a decision of a judge, etc. We've been in the last years exclusively focused on one primary objective, which was privacy, which, because of the developments around us over the last 2 years, moved to a second priority, which was cybersecurity. So everything was designed in order to meet these objectives. And the objective of making sure that our lawful authorities could continue to conduct their work was forgotten and put aside. And I think most of the recommendations are there to change this. I think it's the right time, since this is backed also by, again, very recent jurisprudence of our highest court, explicitly mentioning that
in every decision there needs to be a balance between different rights. There is not only the Charter of Fundamental Rights or the privacy rights that overshadows all the others. Everything is a balancing act. And second, a very important principle as well is that even the amalgamation of data without targeting is possible in a system that allows the identity of the person to be protected. So basically, if you apply the principle of pseudonymization, which is well known to many technical experts, you can operate indiscriminate retention. So I think with this wave of good news and good new also ideas coming from the experts, I'm very hopeful that in the next months and certainly in the new legislative period, we can come with commensurate and effective responses.
Vanessa, let me jump back to you on this question of privacy versus security, as it's often framed. Talk us through where you see the problems there from a legal perspective, and also from the perspective of maintaining public trust, which is, after all, essential to good policing, but also goes hand in hand with the requirements for privacy.
Let me start with a question that I always ask to my students. Would you prefer to have your mother search your room or look into everything that is stored or accessible from your phone? And they quickly make a choice, and you can gather what the choices that they make. But I don't think there is an opposition. There doesn't have to be an opposition between privacy and security. Privacy comes with security. You can enjoy your privacy if there is security, if there's sufficient security in your life, in society. But it's all about striking the right balance, and that is, of course, not obvious. I think the whole data retention case law shows that this balance is very difficult to strike. Mr. Onidi just said that the court has become a bit more helpful in recent judgments, with, again, 2 major judgments rendered at the end of April. But you can also see that the court is really getting into an almost legislative exercise, because there is no EU legislation. And we definitely need this new EU legislation, because otherwise we put the court into a position that it shouldn't take. For instance, the notions of serious crime. The court in Bolzano said this is a choice of member states, but at the same time it said, no, it's actually also an EU autonomous concept. And it says, well, at national level, such a threshold could be proportionate, but that in every single case, a judge should verify whether it is indeed a serious crime. So take theft, for instance, which in theory is a serious crime, but in concreto, in the specific case at hand, is it also a serious crime? For instance, imagine someone without a home stole a loaf of bread, or a can of beer from a shop. Is that serious crime? But you see how delicate it becomes, and striking this right balance is not obvious. But I think we need an EU legal framework. Otherwise, you will have disparities at national level, which is the case. And the e-evidence regulation will bring those disparities only more to the forefront, because asking for the production of data depends on whether data has been retained. There's data retention schemes in some member states and not in the others. Some have very long retention periods, others have very short ones or no obligation to retain. So we need this, we desperately need this, and preferably by the time the e-evidence regulation becomes applicable in August 2026, which is awfully close.
Louisa, looking a little bit at the recent past, so the Lisbon Declaration was signed in March 2023, and then just last April we had the signatories in London. What has changed between those 2 points in time that you could say?
Well, in Portugal, a law has passed recently regarding the metadata, and Polícia Judiciária was a pivotal member cooperating in that law. But I see that the legislator normally tries to pose more restrictions to law enforcement while we are speaking about the need to access to data and to have data available for criminal investigation purposes or for prevention of crime, there is also a fundamental concern regarding fundamental rights and privacy, but sometimes it's difficult to achieve a balance between privacy and those data retention aspects regarding time and how law enforcement have access to data. In Portugal now is the Supreme Court that will allow the access to data, which I don't know if it will be easier, or I don't think so. So I think the harmonization of legislation would be very helpful in Europe, because where there is a gap, criminals will take advantage of that, and that's the secret for them, and the police forces can do nothing about that.
So, Jürgen, I'm going to sort of leave the floor wide open to you to tackle any of the points that you've heard raised, because I do know you have a flight to catch. So tell us, where does Europol fit into? You've heard a lot of concerns, as it were, from your fellow panelists. Where can Europol help bridge that gap, and what can be done going forward, and what would you like to see happening?
Well, I think, first of all, I can agree to all what was said, and in particular also what was said from the academia side, that this potential contradiction between data protection on the one hand side, police on the other hand side, this is non-existing, I would say. This is a complementary element. And the same is also for privacy rights and ensuring privacy in the field of security. So that is definitely necessary and important. And from Europol's side, I would put it very blunt. All of the legal developments you described that would be necessary and would be supported from us, but we act now. That means in practice that when it comes, for example, to the development of artificial intelligence tools, the first thing what Europol is doing, for example, via the Innovation Lab, is just checking with the member states what kind of tools do you have already available, because you would not believe it. It was also an element which was introduced by the Ministers of Justice and Home Affairs in 2020. Say, wouldn't it be a good idea if we share our knowledge amongst the EU member states? And it very often happens that between Belgium and Sweden and France and Germany, they are all developing the same things without knowing that the other one is developing this. Economically, a pure nonsense, beside the fact that also security issues might suffer under this. So what Europol is doing is just to create the overview, who has what and who is willing to share. And then to define what is missing. For example, what is missing in the artificial intelligence tools. This can be developed under the lead of a member state, under a lead of a member state that might be further developed than others. So, and also then, and this is also an important element, also to see how things can be financed, because this is also, of course, also a very important tool. And by this, and I think this should be finally also important to mention, we care utmost about fundamental rights and privacy rights. The executive director mentioned the introduction of the fundamental rights officer at Europol as part of the Europol regulation, which was changed. We have a project which is called Accountability Principles for Artificial Intelligence, which is doing nothing else than, together with the Fundamental Rights Agency, with Eurojust, to see what kind of principles have to be applied if you develop an artificial intelligence tool in the police, to avoid discrimination, bias, and to stick to all the principles which made the European Union so strong, which is based on data protection, privacy rights. And this is exactly what we are applying in practice via the Innovation Hub, which is also at Europol. Last remark is we are also offering simply technical help, because a lot of member states are still struggling, for good reasons, also to decrypt data. The decryption platform was mentioned, but I think should be also mentioned that the digital support unit, which is existing in the European Cybercrime Center, is a practical tool just to support the member states, and this is why Europol was created.
I'm going to ask whether there's any questions from the floor for this panel at this point, because I know we're on a tight schedule. Anyone got anything they'd like to ask to our panelists before I get them to tell me what keeps them awake at night? Anyone? No? Okay. Right. Jürgen, I will come back to you then and ask you for a look to the future. What's your utopia? What keeps you awake at night? What should be the landscape for the next, say, the next 25 years of Europol?
Well, we discussed it in the directorate of Europol because you can imagine that we are currently also asked by the Commission, which is understandable, to give in some ideas what should we do in the next 10 years, because this is simply related to the multi-financial framework, which ends in 2034, so 10 years from now. So first of all, I live now in the country, former GDR, where they were very successful in 5-year plans, but somehow it didn't work out. So be careful when you do 10 years plans, because things might change. But what we discussed in essence is that we believe that we even can stay a much stronger focus still in the operational support of member states. We have to develop the right technical tools, and by this, that is our belief, we might develop in an even more operational organization without becoming immediately an EU FBI.
Olivier, your thoughts on what we need going forward, and what are the dangers of just maintaining the status quo? Because we have to say that we need to adapt and be flexible.
I think first important aspect for us is that we manage to have a very constructive relation and build up like quite a solid new both legislative but operational framework, because we got rid of this fantasy of wanting to build a European FBI, and equally be very strict on the fact that we are not aiming at EU level to encroach into issues that are dictated by national security issues. That's very important because it comes in and out on a regular basis and distracts very much our activities. Second, I think for us the heart of the activities in the coming years have been launched. It's really to find a reasonable and sustainable solution to get access to this data. We have now the different paths we need to follow. It still needs a lot of reflection on weighting how we get there, how to best use the different frameworks we have. And the other aspect is the fundamental work that has gone in the context of better understanding the activities of criminal organization and the mapping you've discussed early on. I think this is a fundamental trigger which will push us to be more active in looking at those organizations and really crystallizing and concentrating our minds, our efforts, our tools in investigations on these organizations, the individuals behind, and further strengthen our framework in order to actually punish and limit their capacity to act. Finally, on the last thing, I think we are very much depending on technological development. And that's another area where we have to further consolidate expertise, collective means of action, and find through the traditional use of defining what a product needs to respect or what a service provider needs to respect in order to be able to offer services or a product, to also insert there a number of obligations which are relevant for our own community. We've lost this, which was very much prominent in the 50s and 60s, very much dictated by, how the law enforcement community could work. So I'm not suggesting that we destabilize the balance and the priorities that have been well established, but I think that the work of this high-level expert group is a bit of an eye-opener on the fact that we need to come back and factor in this major aspect in order basically for the police, for the judges to continue to exercise their work. It's very important.
Well, thank you very much, Jürgen. A round of applause for Jürgen, because he has to run and catch a flight, but has taken the time. Thank you. Louisa, then, actually also sort of saying with what Olivier was stating, looking to the future and from the Portuguese perspective, how are we preparing the police forces going forward, particularly in terms of innovation? What are you looking for in the future?
Well, we are doing major steps towards the preparation of Policia Judiciária. We are working very much with the European Commission in the Horizon Europe, which is an horizon of opportunities for law enforcement. We are very much concentrated in anticipating what is the future, what the digital police will be, what are the needs, what are the trends, what are the capabilities, what are the competencies that we have to have inside. And so we have a strategy of innovation, and we are fueling also Europol and the European Commission with the needs that law enforcement have in order to have technology adapted to what we know, to what we can anticipate today regarding the future. But I would say that it would be very positive if all law enforcement agencies were aligned in this matter, because some people are staying behind. We try not to stay, so we want to be ahead of criminals if possible. So we are taking advantage of Europol, of European Commission, European Innovation Lab, Europol Innovation Lab. We are in the ecosystem of innovation in order to be better prepared, to anticipate and to be prepared for the future.
Vanessa, a final word from you. I know you have a forthcoming publication on e-evidence, so we should watch out for that. But what question would you like to be asking your students in 10 years' time? Will it be the same one?
That would be a difficult one. I would like to see, perhaps not as a question to my students, but that our students and future lawyers have also an IT background. Last week at another conference, someone from the private sector said, the future staff members that everyone is looking for, or many institutions, are people with an undergrad in IT and a master's degree in law. And we are developing them, and so at my own university we're setting up, but this takes time. And you were referring, Luisa, to giving tools to police, but we also need to train our judges, our prosecutors, and our lawyers, defense lawyers in court, so that they understand these tools, because they have been trained looking for physical, real-world crime, and they may not lag behind either. So we need to prepare for that.
Thank you. A really good concrete point. Tech skills for all going forward. Well, thank you very much for the discussion. Can we have a round of applause, please, for our panelists? And before I hand the podium back to our high-level speakers for their conclusions, I should remind everyone that there will be lunch served outside. And for those who are going to be here in the afternoon, that's those of you who've got an orange band on your badges, you need to be back here for 2 o'clock. But thank you all very much for your attention, and for all of our 3 panelists for being so interesting. I'm going to hand the floor back now to the Executive Director of Europol, Catherine de Bolle.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner, colleagues, anniversaries are always an opportunity to reflect on our progress and our future. I am very happy that we gathered here today to share the reflections together on our internal security and its evolutions. We have reflected over the past 25 years, and we have reflected over how can we prepare the next 25 years. The discussions these past hours have highlighted how much the threats of serious and organized crime and terrorism have evolved in the past 25 years, and our responses too. I remember that 25 years ago, I was still at the beginning of my police career in Belgium, and back then most of my work was still rooted in paper-based processes. Most of the words we have heard from today, from the panelists, are about digitalization, being at the heart of all of our discussions. Debate leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence to improve our operational relevance, and engaging in operations that deal with over billions of criminal encrypted messages. We see how much and how fast things have evolved, and it is important that we prepare for the transformations and emerging threats coming at us. Considering how much has changed in our field, we have to anticipate future developments. For this, it is essential that we keep assessing criminal and terrorist threats to guide our actions, both in legal terms and in operational terms. But beyond this, we have to construct an agile and flexible framework that enables us, the law enforcement community, to respond to any new criminal or terrorist threat. And to achieve this, we have to accomplish collective efforts to these several needs. We need to continuously adapt our legal frameworks. Like you mentioned, Commissioner, we have to run. We need to be innovative, to develop the right skills and the right tools for law enforcement. We need appropriate resources. We need to access data and we need cooperation. We might also need to innovate in our approach to law enforcement cooperation. We don't have to look to the past all the time. We need to think sometimes also out of the box. How will we cooperate with the private sector? It's of particular importance to us because they have a lot of data that is relevant for the law enforcement community. Finally, the observations lead us to adapt, to modernize the role of law enforcement. The digital transformation of the society has profoundly reshaped our approach to crime. And today, law enforcement agencies are becoming data guardians as much as we are becoming more and more peacekeepers. Last decade, our main challenge was about availability of data. Today, our main challenge is the accessibility of data. What will be the challenge of tomorrow? As we can imagine a world where a bigger and bigger portion of data is artificially generated. On this matter as well, our cooperation with the private sector will be essential. To ensure that we can efficiently investigate crime, we need to access the data to investigate. We need private parties to cooperate to prevent illegal activities on their platforms. And considering the volume of data some parties hold, we need their cooperation to share the responsibility on the illegal activities held within these data. This is not about legal requirements. It's also about social responsibility, one that redefines the essence of modern law enforcement. Naturally, this also calls for a strengthened data protection regime. So we also need cooperation with legislators. We benefit at Europol from significant legal advancements achieved these past years on our internal security in the EU. The current Commission, and in our domain, specifically you, Commissioner Johansson, you have done a lot for this. Many legal developments reshaped the way we approach internal security now. We had the Europol recast with the possibility to process large amounts of data. It was really necessary. We have the Information Exchange Directive, the AI Act, the e-evidence package, and so many others. We also deploy AI technologies. AI technologies should enforce the Digital Services Act, and we tackle terrorist content online. It is clear that the insights from law enforcement are vital for shaping effective legal frameworks. At Europol, a number of legal advances have driven us to mobilize dedicated resources and capabilities. To enforce a strengthened legal framework for our internal security, we have to strengthen even more the law enforcement cooperation, but also our investigative and analytical capabilities. And in addition to that, our legal frameworks should evolve at the pace required to support our operational needs. And reflecting on this, as we navigate through the complexities of digital transformation and geopolitical shifts, the dialogue between legislators and law enforcement practitioners will need to be stronger than ever, on national level and also on European level. This conference, jointly organized by the European Commission and Europol, exemplifies that this dialogue is possible and that it will be beneficial. Commissioner Johansson, I thank you and your team for organizing this joint event and for hosting this. It is a testimony of your commitment to this crucial dialogue that this event demonstrates. It is a commitment I share. I hope the next commissioner will have the same commitment. Dear audience, dear colleagues, thank you very well for attending, for your engagement, your dedication to shaping a secure future collectively in Europe and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Today we celebrate the Europol's 25th anniversary. And I think that we are celebrating in a very fitting way by joining forces to counter present and future security threats. We talked about what we have done and what we still need to do. I want to thank you all for the very interesting discussions that I've been following here from the 3 different panels. I wanted us to focus on 2 great threats in detail: organized crime and terrorism. These are 2 threats by non-state actors that threaten not only people's lives, but also the very foundation of our society and of our democracy. These are existential threats to people and to our common future. We have done a lot. This Commission tabled 25 initiatives and laws in the field of security under this current mandate. It will be for the next Commission to build on these initiatives and to take the fight against crime and terrorism to the next level. We heard also in one panel the importance of implementation of all the new law that we now have in place. New challenges will require resolute actions. For the next Commission mandate, a number of priorities suggest themselves, and we also heard them here during the discussion. First, the threat to internal security posed by state actors, notably Russia, demands urgent attention. We must act before it's too late, before sabotage inflicts serious socio-economic and strategic harm, before, as has not happened yet, lives are lost. Second, we need to further boost cooperation, international cooperation with third countries and with international organizations, but also initiatives in the EU like the European Ports Alliance, also with private partners and customs. Third, we need to find the right balance between privacy and security. And in my view, we are not there yet. Without lawful access to data, security is not possible. And this is why we dedicated a special panel to this issue, the last one. I'm very glad that in its recent judgment, we had also discussed it here, the court has been clear: member states can impose obligations to retain IP addresses in criminal cases. And I'm glad that the Encrochat case, in the Encrochat case, the ECJ found that the principle of trust applies, so member states can use evidence found in other member states. Because it takes a network to fight a network. Europe is a little bit safer than it was 4 years ago, I should say, but the world is a more dangerous place. The challenges are huge. But here today, we have everyone together to meet those challenges. Law enforcement, member states, civil society, academics. I want to thank you all for everything you have done and are doing, and for your participation today. And a special thanks again to you, Catherine, and for your leadership. And of course, a special thanks to Europol. And the best wishes for the next 25 years. You are truly Europe's finest. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I've only a little bit of housekeeping to add, which is that lunch is served. Thank you to those online. Keep sharing your thoughts using SecurityEU as your hashtag. And enjoy the networking, and be back here at 2 o'clock if you're joining for the afternoon. Thank you.